Hey everyone, it is Saturday, 7th of June 2014, the beginning of a 3-day long weekend in Australia. Welcome to episode number 4 of ThingCast, the semi-regular stream where I just talk and you guys can leave your comments, and as always you can jump into the question and answer app. The link appears in the bottom left corner. If you follow that, while the stream is active, you can leave your questions, and please keep the questions coming throughout the stream, and I will get to them as we go through. So the things that I guess are kind of new this week that I'd like to talk about are the Nuforce Primo 8 that I received from Nuforce, and I did an unboxing of that earlier on the channel. I also wanted to talk a little bit more about the Sony XBA-H3 because now that I have the Primo 8, it makes for an interesting comparison between these two earphones. The other thing I wanted to just a quick update on the situation with the Logitech UE900 because Logitech has reached out to the community about this, so that's really positive. And we might talk about some other stuff, music I'm listening to, etc., etc. But anyway, let's start with Primo 8 because that has been a bit of a surprise because I didn't actually know much about this earphone before Wolfgang, a lovely fellow over at Nuforce, actually sent me a pair of these to have a listen to. And these are, if you didn't see the unboxing video, sorry, the cable's all tangled up here. There we go. If you didn't see the unboxing video, the Nuforce Primo 8 is a quad balanced armature earphone from Nuforce that is coming in at a recommended retail price of $4.99. So this puts it roughly in competition with earphones like the Westone W40, the Logitech UE900, that kind of thing, though the Nuforce Primo 8 is just a bit more expensive than those. We're not talking about Shure SE846 kind of levels of expense, but we are definitely pushing up when it comes to the earphone market, especially for Nuforce because they've never launched a product at this price point, at least as far as earphones go. So my initial impressions of the Primo 8 have actually been very positive. Normally, I don't really love multi-balanced armature earphones, and the reason for that is really two things. One of them is that I don't feel with balanced armature earphones that I feel like I get the correct timbre for bass notes, particularly in terms of not just the amount of bass, because you can get a lot of bass out of balanced armatures, but the actual physical feel of the bass I always feel is just a little artificial. And the other issue that I find with multi-balanced armatures is that it's actually very difficult to get a multi-balanced armature setup where you get phase coherence. And phase coherence is a number of things. Phase coherence is not only in terms of electrical phase, which I don't actually really understand. I'm not an electrical engineer, but I understand as far as I understand, electrical phase refers to the movement of all the actual elements of the driver in synchrony. Like, so you have 4 balanced armatures. They should be moving in synchrony in terms of electrical polarity and that kind of thing. And it's quite hard to get those all matched up. It's also very hard in a multi-balanced armature setup to make sure, even if the drivers are all kind of oscillating in time, whether the actual sound waves from each driver reach the ear in basically the same kind of time. So that's called time domain coherence, and it's very, very hard to do this. So I've looked at other balanced armatures. For instance, with the Westone 4R, I didn't really like those because I found that even though they have a very nice, warm, kind of luscious sound to them, they don't actually have very good time domain coherence. So if you actually look at the measurements of them, they actually, when you look at the impulse response and that kind of thing, they do not have the sound arriving at the ear in roughly the same kind of time. So there's not a natural decay, and you can actually hear that when you listen to the Westone W4 series, because you can hear, particularly on leading notes like pianos or string instruments, it doesn't sound clean. The initial kind of leading edge of the sound doesn't sound clean, and then the kind of decay sounds a bit wobbly, so it's all slightly a bit mushy. I thought the Logitech UE900 was a bit better at that. I haven't heard the Shure SE846. Interestingly, the Sony XBA-H3 I thought did better than the other two quad balanced armatures in terms of that kind of decay, just because Sony chose not to use a crossover. So they eliminated a lot of issues doing that. But by not using a crossover, they ended up with an earphone that was very sensitive to all sorts of electrical problems in terms of the source player, and also the overall sound signature of the XBA-H3 wasn't exactly the favorite thing for a lot of people. The Nuforce Primo 8, just to get back to that after that big kind of technical rant, Nuforce claims to have introduced a crossover that improves the electrical phase performance of the player. And apparently, some of the initial measurements I've seen over at Rin Choi's blog indicates that they have really resolved a lot of the phase issues in terms of this quadruple balanced armature setup. Though the initial setups, and I don't know if it's because Rin had a pre-production unit, but the actual impulse response graph indicates that there is still a little bit of pre-ringing, and that means that there is still a bit of sound that arrives from one of the drivers before the sound arrives from any of the other drivers. So in practice, when I listen to the Primo 8, it's really quite clean, and it's really quite startling that, because when you have a quad balanced armature setup, every single element of the frequency from low frequencies to high frequencies, everything sounds very fast and very, very startlingly like you get this amazing sense of soundstage and instrument placement, etc., etc. But I still think that in terms of actual leading edge kind of precision, it's still not quite there compared to some of the other balanced armature. Compared to some of the other single driver dynamics that I currently am listening to. That said, it's still a really, really nice earphone. It's an earphone that's quite sensitive to tip selection. So you can either use the Comply foam tips that are included, or there's some silicone tips. But it's really interesting, when you switch to the silicone tips, immediately there's a very strong difference in terms of the high frequency response. The Comply foam tips are the most linear in terms of their response. They sound the most balanced. You get a nice high frequency kind of extension. I don't quite find the Comply foam tips that comfortable though, and in terms of sound, it's a very sort of lean sound. They overall have a bit of lower mid kind of emphasis, not mid bass, but not lower treble. It's kind of somewhere broader in the middle, and so it's definitely an earphone for, I think, vocal lovers. It's really very quite nice. With the silicone tips, it gets a bit warmer. I actually find that it maybe gets a little forward in terms of sibilance with the silicone tips. That's something that was indicated in Rin Choi's analysis, but I'll have to do more listening. But my initial impression of the sound of this earphone is very positive. My main criticisms with this earphone, I would say, first off, are just that the construction of this earphone is pretty good, but I would have kind of preferred to see, for $499, I would have liked to see something that was a bit more, I guess, strong in terms of build materials. We are looking at two plastic shells which have been assembled together, and in particular in terms of the nozzle, I think that could be an area for potential failure, just in terms of if you exerted too much pressure on this nozzle, it could bend or that kind of thing. But overall, the build quality is okay. It's not a huge problem. The other thing with the MMCX connectors is that I have noticed that with all MMCX connectors, I find they're rather sensitive to having any sort of dust or anything in them. So they will have issues if they have any sort of particulate matter in them. The ear guides are quite stiff. though once you get them bent into shape, they work really well because they don't get bent out of shape, which is really nice. Overall, I'm quite impressed by these. I don't know, it's always difficult to talk about value for money when you're approaching this kind of price point. At $4.99, I think this is better. Just off the top of my head, I don't have them on hand to directly compare to. I think this is better than the Westone kind of quadruple balance armatures. I think it's better than the I don't know if it's better than the Logitech UE900. I had to have those side by side, but my gut impression is that it is better. But $40.99 is a lot to spend, so it's kind of really a question of is that what you're prepared to pay, I guess. But I do think they are very, very good earphones. It's been really interesting, moving on, comparing them with the Sony XBA-H3. Because the Sony XBA-H3 is a very different earphone in many ways from the Primo 8, whereas this is mid-forward. This is actually somewhat mid-recessed. In terms of some of the lower vocal ranges, particularly with male vocals, the H3 is actually a little recessed compared to the strong bass response and the treble, which is somewhat forward actually, even compared to the Primo 8. So this, you have much more of an S kind of shimmer to all the sound. The bass is actually stronger to the point where it can sound a little blunt and a little heavy-handed at times, but overall I actually quite like the bass response. A lot of people did complain about that with the H3, but I think the default, maybe because I like my bass and I listen to a lot of electronic music along with other genres, maybe I have a bit of a bias there. But my main problem with the H3 is actually just being the ergonomics. These ear guides, they're big and floppy, and each time you put them on, it's a bit of an ordeal because you put them on and then you kind of have to shape them to your ear. If you put them in your pocket, they completely warp out of shape. So they're already quite big to put out of your pocket anyway. And as you can see, they look pretty. They do not look subtle on the ear. Apart from that, at the current Amazon pricing, if you're interested in these for $230, I say go for it. Just be aware that these aren't that practical to be using outside. They don't have the strongest noise isolation, and they are, as you can see, really huge. But if you're prepared to put up with that, I think the sound is actually really, really good for $230. I could not argue with that price, just as long as you're aware of all the caveats. I might jump to the question and answer just briefly at this point, because Kenneth has actually said something interesting. Kenneth says, I think you should set up a public Spotify profile so that you can follow your playlist and music. I wasn't aware that there was even such a thing as a public Spotify profile. Does it list the things that you're listening to through the streaming service, or can you upload your own kind of library? Let me know more about that because I'm kind of curious. I don't really know that much about it. I do have a Last.fm account, but it's been a while since I had the scrobbler active, so it hasn't been updated that well. But on the subject of music, I suppose I should let you know what I'm listening to, because this few weeks I've been listening to number one, I've been listening to Kiss Each Other Clean by Iron and Wine, and this is because I've been on a bit of an acoustic kind of music bender at the moment. So this has been a really cool album. There are some tracks on this, particularly Tree by the River, which are just, they just sound good, right? There's a melancholy kind of vibe going through this entire album. And it's just really kind of nice acoustic. I wouldn't call it easy listening. There's a bit of an edge to it, but it's really nice kind of indie folk acoustic kind of music. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, I recommend you check that out. That's Iron and Wine, Kiss Each Other Clean. The other thing I've been listening to is I got this best of kind of album of They Might Be Giants. And if you don't know They Might Be Giants, they're this kind of band. I don't know what you would call them. They're almost like a novelty band. They're kind of like Jonathan Coulton, if you've ever heard his music, but a little less kind of novelty. They do kind of strange, semi-humorous songs. Most of the lyrics are quite cryptic. I don't love all of the music on this album. Some of it is just a bit throwaway, I think, but I think things like Dr. Worm is a song that everyone should listen to. I can find it there. Is it called Dr. Worm? Yeah, Dr. Worm. Dr. Worm is a very famous song, and actually, I think scored very high in the music charts in Australia when it was released. This is an American band, but nonetheless, it's a really fun little song, Dr. Worm. It's just about a worm who's a drummer. And if you can watch it on YouTube with the music video, it is a lot of fun. It's a kind of pick-me-up song. Another song they're really famous for is Istanbul, not Constantinople, which is another kind of thing. It's like, I used to listen to a lot of Weird Al, and I don't really listen to kind of parody or novelty songs anymore. But I guess I still have that inclination a lot of the times to listen to this kind of music, because I listen to a lot of They Might Be Giants and Jonathan Colton and that kind of thing. It's kind of fun kind of music, and this album was like $15 for 29 tracks, so I thought I might go for it. So that's been okay. I got this yesterday. This is Glass Animals by Zaba, or it might be Zaba by Glass Animals. I actually do not know that much about this band. I actually just saw this album on the shelf. It was $14.99. I looked it up. There are some initial reviews of this. It's still on pre-order in some countries, so it is a new release album. And I've only listened to a few tracks, but so far I've been really, really impressed. If you like the XX, you might like this album. It's kind of dreamy, kind of almost hip-hop, but electro kind of influences, electro-pop, that kind of thing. Very smooth, very cool, really complex kind of music so far that I've been listening to. It's very dense, and I really think the album cover, and I love album art, I think this is really appropriate album art for this album, because it has that kind of low-key kind of density and complexity to the music, and it's really a cool album. I was trying to find the first track on this album to link to people because it was such an interesting track, but I couldn't find it on YouTube. But there's a few music videos from the singles from this album. I think Gooey is one of them, and the other one is Black Mambo. Gooey has a really interesting music video, so you should kind of check that out, I suppose. It's Gooey. This has been a really nice album, and I will be looking forward to kind of listening to this. I always like it when I manage to buy a random album on an impulse purchase, and it turns out to be a really good buy. I've done that a few times. A lot of the times it's because I look at the album art and I go, oh, that looks interesting. And they say don't judge a book by its cover, but I kind of feel with album art, if the artists are doing their job and they've actually talked to the musicians and they get a sense of what the album is about, the album art actually tells you a lot about what the music will be like, what the kind of band's personality is, and particularly about the production value. You can sometimes see that there's album art that looks really bad, but then there's album art that looks so bad that it must have been intentional, right? And that's always also an indicator of some really funny looking albums. Oh, and I've also been listening to Plastic Beach, which I finally got around to listening to from the Gorillaz. I haven't listened to this from beginning to end yet. I really should do that, but it's an album that I've been meaning to get around to listening to for a long time. So that's been a pretty cool album so far. And the only other thing I should point out, it's not really an album, but I got this yesterday as well because it was $36, and I thought, you know, that's cheaper than Steam, so I should get this. So I will be having fun playing this. Someone remarked on the Facebook page that I don't seem like someone who loves South Park. I absolutely love South Park. There's a lot of kind of TV shows that I love, but I love South Park. I don't watch it regularly. I don't really watch TV that regularly, but I really love South Park because the creators of South Park, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, are very noted libertarians. If you didn't know that, it's quite actually interesting. They are libertarians. So what's interesting is that because they're libertarians, they don't really sit on the traditional kind of left or right side of politics, and so they mercilessly use their position to just skewer everyone, and that's what I really like about the show. You watch it, and you know, they point out the contradictions in so much of public dialogue nowadays, and it's really quite. You know, I think it's still, even this, after this many years and after this many seasons, I still think it's a very, very clever kind of show, and it is also just incredibly in-your-face offensive, I guess. And I don't mind that. I'm a big fan of this kind of thing. I'm a big fan of Louis C.K., that kind of thing. I think if you do it thoughtfully, which I believe the people like Louis C.K. or Trey Parker or Matt Stone, if you do it thoughtfully, I think that kind of offensive brand of satire is really quite effective. But maybe your opinions differ. I'll drop into the Q&A again because VD's, or rather VD's Productions, because I don't know if that's actually your name, but what is your favorite electronic artist? I have quite a few electronic artists that I would regard as my favorites. Just off the top of my head, I really loved Grimes. Her kind of album Visions, that is one of my favorite albums of all time. The Knife, I absolutely love The Knife. They're from, I believe, Iceland. Just really cool kind of electro-pop kind of music. If you want to check them out, check out the album Silent Shout. That's really awesome. I really love... oh, well, this is funny because I don't remember their name. Let me just pull up iTunes because I just need to... Sorry, I need to move my head around because the microphone is in front of the iTunes icon. I can't see what's happening. I really love... Oh, yes, the Junior Boys, which is not really quite electronic, I guess, but that's kind of lounge or... I don't know what, that electro-pop kind of music. I really love the Junior Boys. And if you wanted to have a cool album from them, I would check out... Yes, pull up the album names because I've forgotten all of them. Check out Begone Dull Care. Begone Dull Care. That's a really cool album that I absolutely love. But yeah, no, I love a bunch of things. I don't really tend to love like electronic dance music. Because I tend to find that it's electronic dance music, when they make the music, it's made so that you can dance to it, right? So it's made so you can dance to it in a club, and it's made therefore so that people have a sense of familiarity. So if you hear one verse of that kind of electronic dance music, you know what the beat's going to be like, you know what's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 minutes of the song, and it's made so that it's very easy to mix together by DJs. But I tend to find that as a result, electronic dance music, like, as a gross generalization, but it tends to sound a little samey over time. It tends to sound a bit it tends to sound a bit repetitive sometimes. So I do prefer kind of electro-pop kind of genres, electro-clash. And I don't really like genre naming conventions, but hey, it makes it easy to shorthand what you're talking about. And there's that really kind of annoying name for a genre, IDM, which refers to intelligent dance music. I really hate that name, but that's like kind of a blanket term to describe electronic kind of dance sounding music, but it's really more kind of indie. So I guess things like Aphex Twin and that kind of thing fall under that IDM category. So yeah, no, but there's a bunch of I don't know why it is about electronic tones. I mean, I've tried listening to dubstep. I got a Skrillex album just to kind of try that out. I find it a little exhausting to listen to, honestly, and I think that's what most people talk about when they talk about why they don't like dubstep. I don't mind it. I think it's really crazy that it's a musical genre that evolved around people realizing, hey, we can actually make completely new kind of sounds that we've never heard before. And whenever any artist does that, I think that's a really positive thing. So I wouldn't necessarily kind of jump on the bandwagon everyone kind of jumps on. Whenever there's a new thing, people just kind of jump on the opportunity to say, God, this is awful because it's new and it's like something that I'm not familiar with and therefore it's terrible. There's a really, really, really awesome episode of Radiolab, the podcast, and I think it's let me look it up because I just need to put it in. Stravinsky. All right. Yep, it is Radiolab. So Google, this is actually really great. I should actually talk about this, but everyone who's listening, Google Stravinsky. So the composer Stravinsky, Stravinsky, Rite of Spring, and Radiolab. So that's one word, Radiolab. And that's a really interesting episode. It's a pop science podcast. They talk about how the brain processes music. And what they talked about in that episode of Radiolab was the suggestion that when they look at brain scans, when people hear unfamiliar music, and what it seems to be when people listen to music, they're actually counting. But when they listen to unfamiliar music, there's a chemical that kind of trips off in their brain. There's a kind of thing that gets tipped off in your brain that some people react very negatively to, some people react very positively to, but there's a novel kind of reaction in your brain when you listen to something that's completely unfamiliar. And for instance, in that episode of Radiohead, they talk about Stravinsky when Stravinsky is a classical, well, I don't remember, I think a romantic composer, and he composed a piece of music called The Rite of Spring. And when it was first played in 1913, actually, it caused outrage in the audience because it was like music that it was very discordant compared to what people have been listening to in that romantic period, just beautiful melodies and that kind of thing. And then suddenly you had this if you've ever heard the song, it's like it goes like dun 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 dun. Like it's incredibly jarring, and the actual performance on stage that went along with that, because it's kind of a musical opera or something like that, it was enough to cause people to actually stand up and storm out of the hall and become very agitated. And there was actually apparently riots. This might be an urban legend, but it's the kind of thing where people, when you hear something that's new, it really does, things that are unfamiliar take time to get used to. And I suspect that a lot of people kind of initially reject things because of that initial kind of rejection of the new and the startling. So I guess that's how I approach all things in life, because I'm aware of that. I mean, I am quick to jump on all sorts of bandwagons, but I try to keep in mind that you have to try things at least a few times and to get a good feel for things before you can actually make a definitive kind of statement on them. And that's how I generally approach life, I guess. So, you know, a bit of philosophy there. Anyway, so Kenneth asks, what are your thoughts on Radiohead? I have a number of Radiohead albums. I do like them, but I don't absolutely love the band. I know it's really a significant, amazing band, and there are some tracks that I really think are intricate, but it's never been a band that I've just been able to gush about the same way I could gush about all kinds of other bands. Yeah, no, I like Radiohead. Radiohead. I don't love it, but my favorite Radiohead track is actually the one that Tom York, the lead singer of Radiohead, hates the most, and it's Creep. I absolutely love the track Creep. And apparently he wrote that in a very dark period of his life. He hates performing it. He hates the fact that it sounds like such a kind of, you know, self-pity kind of track. But I think it's one of the most... it's an awesome piece of music. I've heard so many cool covers of it. I've heard like kind of vocal chorus covers of Creep, and I think they sound quite excellent. Yeah, that's probably my favorite Radiohead track. I should jump back into what I was going to talk about. Just if anyone is curious about what's happening with the Logitech UE900, Logitech has actually, they actually have made an official statement over at the Head-Fi page for the UE900. Let me just bring that up because that's kind of important. It's a statement that they've basically said that what they're doing with the UE900 and the people who received the new versions of the UE900, there hasn't been a mistake in terms of manufacturing. Let me just pull that up. There hasn't been a mistake in terms of manufacturing. Everyone is receiving what they should be receiving. There has been a different version of the UE900 that is currently being sold, and those parts will become more available in time. It's one of those kind of statements that you have to kind of read between the lines. Honestly, I don't really think it's a satisfactory response. It seems like a response that they've been very careful in how they phrased it. Logitech has reached out to me to put me in contact with some of the product managers over at UE, Ultimate Ears Logitech, and I will be communicating with them just to get some more details about this. But it is an evolving story, and I think, I mean, I'm not going to pass complete judgment. There's still some details that are being released, but I get the impression that this response it is not going to be to the satisfaction of many people who are looking at the thread right now. So, there's that. I should actually point out, so this is also another thing that I should point out, and this is a bit of a soft launch because I have talked about this on Facebook as well, but I actually have a website now. And I haven't kind of initially announced it on a complete video because, and I'm going to announce it like 40 minutes into this thing so that no one actually hears about it except for the 8 people who are watching now. But I did launch a website. It's going to be more of a kind of blog rather than a full kind of rundown of everything that goes on inside the thing. But I'll be posting up lists of things that I compare, etc., etc. The URL is lachlanlikesthething.com. I did buy that URL, some time ago, but I've been sitting on it until now. So I've just put up a few posts, particularly a question about this dilemma I'm having with the computers, that kind of thing. I've been using Facebook page, like my Facebook page, as a kind of blog of sorts, but I feel like it's not been that great for long-form content. So hopefully this will be kind of avenue for that. So if you're curious, just pop over, leave a comment, and I'm hoping that I can do some interesting stuff with that blog. So that's been kind of cool. I'll just jump right back. I would say we've got about 10 minutes left, so I'll just jump into the Q&A at this point and answer any questions you might have. So back to VDs. Are you interested in metal of any kind? If not, I would recommend Amon Amarth. And on the EDM subject, check out Sia by Deadmau5. It breaks the stereotype of him being an EDM artist. Okay, so there's a couple of things going on in that question. I should start with Amon Amarth. That is actually very, very familiar. Let me just Google that for a second because I'm sure that I've heard some of that before. Or someone has mentioned it to me before. I think I have a friend who's really into metal. His name is Sean, and I've been actually doing a kind of Let's Play videos with him, so we'll kind of tease that because I haven't uploaded those yet. But he's really into metal, so he's actually played a lot of metal to me. So I actually have a pretty, I've heard enough metal now that I can have a actual informed opinion about it, I should say. I like when I listen to metal, I appreciate the kind of technical complexity of the music, and I think that in terms of density, there's not many genres like metal. So I think metal is an amazing kind of genre to test headphones on, for instance. But I'm not quite. When I listen to metal, a lot of metal that I listen to, and I know there's a lot of metal that's not quite the same. There's industrial metal and all sorts of other subgenres of metal, and my friend has been very keen to educate me on all the various kind of subgenres. But I sort of miss the melodic aspects of a lot of metal, and when I listen to metal, I'm never sure quite what mood I should be in when I listen to it because it's always quite aggressive, and it's always a lot of times quite angry. Even if what I always find interesting is that the subject matter for metal can be not angry or aggressive or crazy, but the actual way the sound can be very aggressive. I find that contrast really interesting, but I'm not so much a big fan of the genre so far myself. But that's not for lack of trying. I have listened to quite a lot, and I wouldn't say no to listening to new stuff and trying it out. As far as Deadmau5 goes, I have heard so much about Deadmau5. I always hear Deadmau5. I'll check out that track because I have never really gotten into Deadmau5. I've never actually listened to one of his albums from beginning to end. But if you reckon Sia is a good track, I will check that out. And thank you for the link, VDs. I just see that in the question and answer. Sean asks, hey, have you tried any planar headphones? I absolutely have. Oh, actually, no, planars. No. I have tried orthodynamics. I don't think I've ever tried any planars. For those of you who don't know, a planar is a type of headphone where instead of having a circular kind of moving coil diaphragm, actually, I'm going to say something wrong here because I only really understand how orthodynamics works, so I may not get this right compared to a planar. But just as a, please correct me if I'm wrong. I swear I am probably going to be wrong when I say this. But the way planar headphones work is that instead of having a moving coil where you have a central kind of circular diaphragm and then a kind of magnet behind that drives it in and out, a planar is a single membrane sheet that has a magnetic grid that is integrated throughout the actual assembly of the unit. So the entire idea is that the entire membrane moves as one single piece because there is magnetic force on every single segment of the membrane. And the reason why that is very important for headphones is that when you have a moving coil diaphragm, like with a circle, and then the magnet going behind it, at low frequencies, that moves as one unit. It moves in ways that engineers can understand. But when you approach higher frequencies, and this is what's called breakup, when you approach a higher breakup frequency, the membrane stops moving as one unit. What starts happening is that the center of the membrane will move forward while the edges of the membrane will the diaphragm, not the membrane, will move backwards. And you'll get an issue where the entire driver moves not as one unit, and it doesn't move as what engineers call perfect piston movement. So the result of the driver just kind of moving at different rates along different parts of the surface is that you get harmonics, you get distortion, because the driver is not, it's introducing all these kind of strange bends and all sorts of things. Everything is wobbling around because of the high frequency movement. So the idea of a planar headphone and orthodynamics is that because they can apply moving force to every single segment of the magnet, they can avoid having extreme kind of breakup from fast oscillation. I haven't heard that many. I think I heard the. Actually, I stand corrected. I have heard the Orpheus from Sennheiser just briefly, and that sounded pretty amazing. I think that's a planar. It might be an ortho. I'm not sure. But yeah, no, not a huge amount of experience. I would like to one day, but they are seriously expensive and seriously complicated, just in terms of the density of the equipment. Kenneth asks, have you considered extending to album reviews? No. I like music, but I don't think I listen to enough music where it's hard to say because album reviews are so subjective, and I find the idea of reviewing an album very strange because it's kind of, in the end, you're just basically saying, I like this, and I don't like this. And when you look at really serious album reviewers, they have a lot of stuff. The one thing that, it's like a movie review, they have a lot of stuff they can refer to. They can go, oh, this sounds like this, and this has this kind of reference and that kind of thing, and that's really nice. I don't necessarily have that musical depth of knowledge where I can really draw those comparisons. So I feel like when I make an album review, I'm just saying, well, I kind of like the way this sounds. I like that. I don't mind talking about an album, just going, oh, I've been listening to this, and this has been really cool, like, because that's pretty simple. But in terms of really articulating the reasons why I like or dislike something, I find that a little bit daunting, especially compared to headphones. I guess there's a certain amount of, when I review a technology product or a headphone, there's a functional aspect to it that is relatively easy to critique because everyone has the shared terms of reference. They can understand if something's not comfortable, if something's not blah blah blah. Like, it's still subjective, but it is grounded in some degree of objectivity, which makes it a little easier to talk about that kind of thing. In terms of music reviews, people come from so many different backgrounds. They listen to so much different music. It's hard to really have a just an opinion that isn't necessarily so grounded in your own subjectivity. That said, I do like talking about the music I listen to, so I post it up on Facebook, and maybe I'll start doing that on the blog, but I don't think it's likely that I'll start making album review videos. This is very strange because I just noticed that the question and answer apps, some of the questions just disappear over time, so I don't actually know what's going on there. But it's been about 40 minutes, so I might just wrap it up. I'll just answer the 2 remaining questions that are on this. So the reason VD says is the reason I recommend Amon Amarth is that it's about Vikings sailing Norse mythology. It is considered a melodic Viking metal. So I assume that if metal was something you might like to get more into, it may be pretty cool. Check out Deceiver of the Gods. I swear, just the name of that album, Deceiver of the Gods, Sean has mentioned this album to me before. So I guess I'll check it out. I'll see what I can. I'll gotta listen to some of this music first, but I'll check it out and I'll let you know how I like that. Thank you for the suggestion, though. You should, Francisco asks, you should have a listen to Mount Eden. I would recommend Sierra Leone and Airwalker. Okay, all right. I'll look those up. I don't know what kind of genre that is, but I will have a bit of a Google. And lastly, Alex asks, do you feel that streaming services like Spotify and Google Music 320 kilobits per second are good enough for audiophile listening? This question comes up every single time I do a Hangout, and so I shouldn't really kind of repeat myself that much because people have heard it so many times. My general opinion, I've done the ABX tests. All I can tell you is that if you are curious about the answer to this question, do the ABX test yourself. That's at this point, that's all I can say. Is I was not prepared to go out on a limb that far to talk about how I think high bitrate MP3s or particularly high bitrate AAC. The jury is still out on high bitrate MP3 because even at very high bit rates, people can kind of pass the ABX test. It's much rarer to find someone who can pass an ABX test on high bitrate AAC. But in regards to that, I think that they are perfectly suitable for audiophile listening if you are going to use them outside on a train or on a plane or in a portable situation. There is no way you're going to be able to hear any difference between 320 kilobit MP3 and lossless. You just won't hear the difference if you are in an environment which has background noise. When you're at home, when you have really expensive headphones and you have some really well mastered albums and it's very, very, very quiet in the room, I think you have a better chance of passing ABX tests. But again, it's not consistent enough to the point where I would say you absolutely need to use lossless music at home. The only reason why I don't object to using lossless music at home is because hard drive space is cheap, so why not? Just why not have the lossless? But nowadays, I have no real objection to, for instance, buying from iTunes or anything else. I'm pretty happy to get high bit rate kind of MP3 music. And when you ask the question, is it good enough for audiophile listening? Well, that's kind of a strange question in itself because what does that mean? Like, what is an audiophile? Like, is it? You can define an audiophile as someone who doesn't listen to high bit rate lossy music, right? You could actually define it that way. It just depends on, don't feel like you need to pass any sort of test to go, I'm an audiophile or I'm not. Just, if it sounds good to you, then it sounds good to you, right? If you want to make sure, if you want to be sure about this and you're really kind of unsure about the whole question of high bit rate lossy encoding, just do the ABX test. And I've made many videos about ABX testing, so just go and try it out. It will take you 20 minutes to get it set it up, and then you can save yourself so much money and time and effort and doubt just by trying it out for yourself. That's all I can suggest. Anyway, thanks to everyone who's joined in for this Hangout. It's been great to have you. As always, this video will go up afterwards, and you can leave your comments and everything like that. But obviously, you can't join into the question and answer part because that's already not going to work because this is a live stream. But anyway, thanks for watching. You can talk to me as always on facebook.com/LachlanLikesAthing or on Twitter @LachLikesAthing. And now I have that new website, LachlanLikesAthing.com. So check that out. I'll be putting up more stuff as the time goes on. Anyway, thanks for joining and happy listening.